Hi, everyone. Let's officially start. So my name is Perica. I'm a co-founder of 57 Hours platform which connects clients with guides and guided outdoor adventures. You can find on our platform a travel adventure in every corner of the world. And if we don't have it listed, we certainly know the guides and their friends who can take you anywhere you want to go across the globe. And one of the guides, I'm especially proud that we are working with Rob, I think now for 2 years already, from the very start of this project. And Rob has been guiding for 15 years. He's writing, he's writing books and guiding manuals. He wrote a mountain guide manual a few years back, and he just got his newest book, the ski guide manual, out. I think November 1st was the official release date. Congratulations, Rob, on the book. And I think if Rob is writing guides like manuals for other ski guides, there is probably no better man than to show you how to do your first steps safely in the backcountry world, how to go there. Before giving the word to Rob, just want to tell you all that you can ask questions in the Q&A. You have the icon in the toolbar below. Ask all the questions you have for Rob. We'll answer them either during the presentation. If not, we'll answer every single question after. Rob's presentation will take probably 45 to 50 minutes. And without much more from me, except another thank you for the great turnaround, Rob, the stage is yours. So take us to this amazing world of backcountry skiing.
Great, thanks, Perica. Hi, everybody. Unbelievable turnout, so thanks for showing up. We'll dive right in. I am in Chamonix, France, so I'm a little ahead of some people, behind a couple people. So thanks everybody for adjusting their schedules and doing this. So we went back and forth a little bit on the title and how many slides we should have and all these sorts of things. So one of the things we wanted to do is get people some really helpful beginning information. If it's your first season backcountry skiing, or maybe you're buying a dedicated backcountry setup for the first time after renting a little bit, things like that. We wanted to give you some basic info and a little bit of avalanche awareness and things like that. So really, this is a backcountry kind of 101 survey course. It's a little bit of everything, but what we wanted to emphasize is that it's a beginning basic course. And we'll dive right in. And by all means, hit us with questions, comments. Perica may throw in a couple questions when it's relevant, but if not, we'll try to get to them at the end. If I don't get to a question, then by all means, my email's right at the end on one of the last slides. Hit me an email and shoot me an email, and we'll try to correspond. And if I don't know the answer, which is 50-50, then I'll try to find somebody who does know the answer to it. So we'll do that. So. Well, if you're here, you're psyched.
Rob, I just forgot one small thing. We are giving away one copy of your book, the Ski Guide Manual. So we'll pick the winner from everyone who joined. Now it's 468 of you, so your chances are getting slimmer and slimmer because the number is going up, which is great. Rob will contact the winner, and the winner of the book and the recording will be sent tomorrow. Rob, the stage is yours. I won't interrupt anymore.
Great, no sweat. So yeah, this book, I'll show you the cover here in a second. I have not seen the book. I have emails from people all over the place who've gotten their books, and I still haven't seen the finished copy. So anyway, I'm psyched to see it. So yeah, we'll give you away a copy of the book. And so if you're here, you want to go backcountry skiing, which is awesome, right? Looks great, sounds fun. But if you don't, have your setup yet, you've never been, you don't have a friend who's into it, now what? Now what do we do? So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself, and then we'll dive right in. So I'm an internationally licensed mountain guide, and I'm one of about 150 Americans to have that certification. I own a little guide company called Beta Mountain Guides. That's our logo up there in the screen. And in addition to mountain guiding, I've been a writer since graduating university. So I've done magazine articles and things like this. But most relevant for us is I've written a couple of books on mountain guiding and sort of advanced techniques for being in the backcountry, whether that's rock climbing or alpine climbing or ski guiding, things like that. So that's a bit about me. There's my wonderful family who's upstairs right now. The boys were having a dance party when I came downstairs. Believe it or not, those two little dudes are identical twins. And that's my wife, Rebecca, right there. And they're all upstairs doing their thing, getting ready for bed. And as I said, that's one of my books up there in the corner, the Mountain Guide Manual that came out in 2017. I co-authored that with one of my mentors, Mark Chauvin. And that book's floating around out there now. And that really dealt with rock and alpine techniques for avid climbers. And about 20 minutes into outlining that thing, we realized there was no way we were going to get to skiing. And so we just decided, okay, somewhere down the road, we'll do a ski book. And luckily, I conned Falcon into doing another title. So the Ski Guide Manual just came out. And I'll show you an image of that cover here in a moment. And that's me down below where we relocated to Chamonix, France last year. So we had 4 or 5 months of good living, and then COVID hit. So we've been navigating that like many of the rest of you have. So we now live in Chamonix and are enjoying it as much as we can. We're on lockdown 2.0 now, so we're getting through that. But there's the cover of the Ski Guide Manual. You can see my buddy Ben Tibbetts shot the cover photo, a fantastic photo of a woman named Minna Riamaki skiing the east face of the Entrèves. This is above Chamonix. Now, this is an advanced book, right? So the cover photo looks a little more extreme than what some people may find fun in skiing. But this is what I've been doing. And, you know, this is the book you'd read after a few seasons in the backcountry and your first avalanche course and something like that. But we'll talk about some basic resources and things for people as well. So like I said, I'm a mountain guide. This is, you know, summer work. We're often up in the mountains. Here we are after a day climbing up in the peaks above Chamonix. And, you know, I spend a bunch of the year rock and alpine climbing like this, but it'll come about this time of the year, November, everybody starts really getting psyched up to ski. And so I spend in a good year, November through middle of May, ski guiding, sometimes into June, and traveling all over the place. This is up in Canada where we were teaching a level 2 avalanche course with a bunch of friends. This is a really fun crew that we had there. And the rest of the year, I'm all over the place. This is Le Grave, France. A beautiful shot there of the peak they call La Meige. Le Grave is down in the valley below. And here's a shot from Norway, ski guiding on Svalbard, a collection of islands, about 1,000 kilometers north of the north coast of Norway. This is a pretty special trip as well. Skiing around glaciers and wonderful wildlife, things like that. So that's how I spend winters, is looking for soft, fun snow to ski and traveling around a little bit. So we'll see if this video cooperates. There we go. This is some footage from us skiing in Canada a couple of years ago. You'll see my internet's a little bit slow here, but there we go. But that's my brother way down there. You can see him just coming into view skiing on the glacier. And this is, everybody's hooting and hollering in the video. This is from a peak called Loft Peak, which is up in almost the coast range, way up by Terrace and Smithers, British Columbia. But we had about 5,000 feet 5,000 feet, or about 1,300 meters of skiing like this all the way to the valley bottom. It was pretty neat. So that's the allure of backcountry skiing. And we'll, you know, talk a little bit about how you get into that and some first steps. And one thing we want to emphasize is this is not an avalanche safety course. So there's a bunch of avalanche education you can do. There's a bunch of books, resources, things online, and we will talk about those later. And there's a bunch of these webinars happening all over the place this fall. So we consciously made a decision to leave out a bunch of the avalanche stuff. We'll touch on it. We'll talk about some important things to consider, but there's a bunch of resources out there for you to get going with your avalanche education. So that's not to downplay it by any means, but we felt like there was a little bit of maybe a dearth of information about really basic stuff like bindings, skis, boots, things like that. So we'll get into that stuff here just in a second. So like I said, we'll talk about gear, but then we're going to talk about where to go ski and how to even figure out where to go skiing, guidebooks and online and things like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about who you're skiing with, because that matters quite a bit, both for fun and for safety. And then we'll steer you in the right direction for some avalanche education, both online in books, videos, things like that, and give you some ideas. And all over the country, I know the avalanche courses are really busy. in North America. And friends of mine are adding courses all the time. So hopefully you can find a course this winter, but they're filling up. So we'll try to get you into one here in the coming weeks. And then at the end, we'll have time for some Q&A. So by all means, hit that comment window down below and put in your questions, and we'll get to them. And if we don't tonight, then I will try to email you. If you'd like to email me directly, that's fine. My email will be right at the end, info@VetaMountainGuides, and we'll have it on a slide at the end. And by all means, shoot me an email, and we can correspond a little bit, and we'll try to get your questions answered. So, all right, let's dive into gear, right? One of the things I was joking with Peritza about yesterday, I said, I'm really good at spending other people's money. So I'll show you some gear, and I'll tell you, what to spend some money on, some things maybe you can go used on for the first year or two, or rent or whatever. So we'll dive in. But just like going skiing at the ski hill, you're going to need skis, boots, poles, all that kind of stuff. But we add to that some climbing skins. I'll show you some images of those. I even have some in the room here if we want to get into those a little bit later. And then we'll talk about the Avalanche safety gear. So that's a beacon. Sometimes you hear it called a transceiver. Those are totally interchangeable words. A beacon or a transceiver, and then a shovel and a probe. And I'll show you images of those. We'll talk a little bit about different models and varieties and things like that. And we'll look at backpacks as well. There's, a little bit of a specialized ski pack that we use that you can get away without one for your first few times or whatever, but eventually you're gonna want one. So, all right, so skis, right? So every year the buyer's guides come out and everybody talks about what skis are gonna get that year and all this kind of stuff. And there are a million kinds of skis. If you're already skiing or riding, you can see a snowboard or a split board on the left there. If you're already going to the area, there's just too many choices almost that come in all shapes, sizes, everything. But the good news is there's a million great skis and increasingly more split boards on the market. So it's not going to be hard to find something you like. For anybody who's a split boarder, I'm a skier mainly, so I'm definitely a little biased in that direction. And you heard me use the word split board. So for all the skiers that don't know, that snowboard on the left side of the screen there, that thing actually splits in half. And when you're going uphill, it looks as if you're on skis. And then when that split boarder gets to the top, she or he connects that thing again and then rides it downhill like a regular snowboard. So I am not such an expert on split boarding, but if you have questions, I have buddies who are full-time split board guides, and I'll certainly hook you up with them in both Canada and the United States. But you can see all these brands you might recognize from the ski hill: Rossignol, Atomic, Fisher, Blizzard. They all make fantastic backcountry skis. And they're mostly the same as a traditional ski with a couple little modifications, right? So this is my buddy Paul up here in Canada, and he has a ski. It's a La Sportiva ski. And you can see that shovel, the tip of the ski looks like it's really comes up off the snow, right? So he's got them pressed together there. This is called early rise or rocker in a ski. So you often at a ski hill don't see skis shaped just this way. Like Michaela Schiffer and Lindsey Vaughn, they're not skiing on a ski with any early rise, right? But in the backcountry where snow is awfully variable, or we're skiing really deep, soft snow if we're lucky, a little bit of early rise on the tip and the tail helps that ski float and manage variable snow. So that's why Paul's ski is sort of the shovels coming back up towards him right there. The skiing was going to be good that day, so he was psyched. And there's a bit of early rise in the tail of those skis as well. So most backcountry skis will have a bit of early rise, at least, if not a bunch, in the tip and the tail. And then the other large difference is we try to make those skis much, much lighter than you would have at the ski hill. So the skis that Michaela Schifrin has beaten everybody on have a couple sheets of metal in there and a really stout wood core. Some of these skis in the backcountry, though, will have no metal. They might even have, a different wooden core. There's a wood called Paulownia that ski makers use that's very, very light, but still has some, some resistance and energy in it. And so these skis, when you pick them up, you're going to be astounded at how light they are. There's an argument to be made as soon as they get below a certain weight, they get a little twitchy and weird. So don't get sold on the absolute lightest ski in the ski shop. Often it's not, such a penalty if you're a really good skier or you're skiing in soft snow. A lightweight ski is not such a big deal, but you can't always count on the snow being perfect, right? So But these modern skis, basically, you're looking for a little bit of early rise, and you can, get something that's under 2,000 grams of ski. They make skis all the way down to about 900 grams. I don't know that I would recommend those. They're not as durable. They're a little twitchy, like I said, but that's sort of an overview of those skis. So read some reviews, ask friends, and then you could definitely get by with a used ski the first couple seasons you're in the backcountry. The reality is we're skiing in the backcountry. You're going to hit rocks and, little roots on trees and things like this. The skis get dinged up. So don't feel like you got to drop a couple $1,000 on a handmade pair of skis or something your first year or two. Once you've been doing it a little bit, then you'll have a sense of what kind of ski you might like and things like that. So you could rent a few times, you could buy a used pair at first, something like that. But so once you get your ski, you're going to have to put a binding on it, right? So this binding here is what we call a tech binding, right? So there's two main groups of bindings. We'll talk about tech bindings or pin bindings. You might hear old timers say something like that. But these are great for going backcountry skiing because they are far, far, far lighter than a traditional alpine binding. So the emphasis with a lot of this backcountry skiing is going to be on lightweight, because for people who are doing human powered touring, meaning going uphill, we got to lug these things uphill. So it's nice to have a lightweight binding. This binding is only 200 grams for both the heel and the toe, believe it or not. This is a black diamond one, and there's a bunch of these on the market, Marker and Plume and all these. I'll show you some images of other ones, but you can see those little pins on the side there. I'll show you a close up in just a second. Those actually snap into little dimples on the boot. So that's why people call them a Dina fiddle. The first binding, a tech binding like this, was made by Dina Fit. And so the nickname became Dina Fiddles, because your first day, it's harder than you think to get those little pins into the right spot on your boot. But don't despair, you will get it. And you can practice in the living room a couple times before you go skiing. But those things snap into a dimple. I'll show you here in just a second. But so that's a tech binding right there. I'll show you a heel in just a moment. But the main advantage here is that these bindings allow your foot to come up, the heel to come up while we're touring, meaning going uphill. They're really, really light, but then they ski downhill very, very well. So going downhill, I really don't notice a big difference between this type of a binding and a big frame binding, but they allow you to go uphill, they're lighter weight, and they'll free your heel. I'll show you an image of that here in just a second. So here's another shot of that tech binding from the side with my ski boot snapped into it, right? So there's pins in that heel as well. You can see those two little pins coming out of the heel piece. I'll show you those in just a moment up close. And then there's these two pins that go into the dimple of your boot. So they're a little bit more fragile than an alpine binding. You can't be throwing these things around, or you don't want to be, but they're light and they're efficient and easy. You'll notice on this one too, there's no break. So on a traditional alpine binding, almost all of us at the ski hill, we have a break just in case your ski comes off. You can't let it go flying downhill. Some bindings, some backcountry bindings, will not have a ski brake on them, or you can remove it. So I don't ski with brakes in the backcountry all that often, and I have a leash on my boot, which you can see in the front there. I'll show you a close-up of that in a second. And that's just to prevent my ski from coming off if I crashed real bad, or if you lost it at the top of the hill or something like that, it doesn't slide away into the abyss. So just like ski manufacturers, there's a bunch of good brands making these backcountry bindings. So Dynafit, G3, Plume, Marker, they all make a really good tech binding like this, okay? And the main advantages are super, super lightweight. If it's not for you, we can talk about different types of bindings here in a sec, but yeah, they take a little getting used to, but they work really, really well, actually. So there's the toe of a backcountry ski boot, or a boot with what we call tech fittings. And that's just a dimple right on the side of the toe, and it's actually inside the plastic. When the boot gets made, that insert is inside of there, so it's really fused into the shell of the boot. It's very, very durable. And this just allows that pin binding to grab the toe of your boot, and then when we're going uphill, there's a way to release your heel, and you slide the ski up as if you're on like a cross-country pair of skis, something like that. So that's why that little dimple is there. Here's the heel of that tech binding. Those two pins slot into two little channels on the back of the boot. So you can see it's really, really minimalist. It's a really svelte design. So here's the toe of that boot again. You can see there's the ski leash. Looks like a old school phone cord. If you're over the age of, I guess, 34, you know what I'm talking about, an old school phone. My kids have never seen an old school phone though, so they don't know what I'm talking about. But it's got a stretchy cord. It's attached to your binding, and then I clip it up to the boot up there, and that little piece of string coming out of my boot. So that's just a means of making sure I don't lose that ski if I do crash and the bindings release and my boot comes out of that. I've never had a problem with these bindings releasing. I weigh about 165 pounds, and I ski pretty hard on occasion, but I really don't have troubles with these things releasing very often. But it is a specialty item. We'll talk about another style of binding here in the next slide that might suit you more if you think you're going to spend most of your time in the ski area, but want the option of going out of bounds and going touring and things like that. So anyway, so that's a tech toe. There's a ski leash. So just like lightweight skis, this is a lightweight binding, but the main difference is that heel has a means of releasing the heel while leaving your toe in it, and you can slide the ski uphill. So your stride kind of like a Nordic skier would. All right, so in addition to the—
Can I just ask you, we have a question that was just on the slide back. So Stephen is asking, is a leash necessary?
So if you're gonna ski at the ski hill, so let's talk about if you're going to go to the ski area. Ski areas generally have a rule. You either need a brake or you need a leash on your ski. So that's if you're at the ski hill. You will occasionally see folks, well, not even occasionally, you'll often see folks skiing in the backcountry with a tech binding without brakes or a leash. To me, I've had two friends have a ski just take off down the hill. One was when they were up top about to go skiing and somebody accidentally kicked my buddy's ski and it launched. And that was embarrassing. He was a mountain guide who was working that day, so that was tricky. And the other one was when a person took a fall, the binding came off their boot and the ski didn't have any retention system, meaning like a brake or a leash, and the ski went for a big ride down the hill. Luckily they found it. So it's not, I wouldn't call it necessary. To me, it's worth the extra little bit of fiddling and the weight. The other, this is more of an advanced topic, but the other reason we have leashes on our skis too is if you're skiing on a glacier and you happen to fall in a crevasse. So let's say now I'm hanging on a rope and my buddy's up top saying, hey man, can you get out of there? It is really, really difficult to try to ascend a rope or climb out of a crevasse with skis on your feet. If you have a leash on your foot, you could reach down and release the ski so it drops off your boot, but it doesn't fall to the bottom of the crevasse. So that's another reason why we have ski leashes. I do it just in case I do something dumb and I fall and my ski comes off my boot. I don't lose my ski. So I do it. I would not call it a rule, anything like that, but there you go. Okay, so those were tech bindings. Now we're on to what I'm just calling a hybrid binding. So you can see this looks a bit more like a regular Alpine binding, right? So it's going to operate a little more as if it's an Alpine binding. They're generally a bit heavier. This one I think is about 600 grams, so it weighs 3 times what the other one did. They're a little more durable. Now, one of the big advantages is if you're going to go to the ski hill and just rip up and down groomers or do whatever you do, this is a great option because this will last you a bit longer. You don't have to baby it so much. It's a little easier to get in and out of. This is a Frischi Tecton. There's a bunch of other companies that make them, but you can see the heel on this binding looks pretty much like an Alpine binding. You just step into it. The toe has these pins on it, but it's a little bit more robust and it's got a little more release mechanism built into it. So arguably it's a little safer for your knees, right? I just turned 50 this year, so I'm starting to think about these kinds of things. And I bought this setup. This is my ski setup right there for skiing inbounds or doing, backcountry skiing off the tram or something. So I don't have to lug this thing uphill, but I have a little more safety built in for my knees. So there is the same binding. Now this binding is now in walk mode, right? So the toe is still attached and you can see if I were in that boot, I could stride forward and then slide the ski along with me. And so it just releases the heel. So all these bindings have slightly different mechanisms to go into this walk mode, but you can see this is the Frischi walk mode right there. So you can see the boot will pivot like that and you can go uphill, right? And as you do that, that little toe lever pops up and it makes sure that the binding stays on your boot a little more securely. When you're skiing, that toe lever goes down and that enables all the release mechanism. So you're less likely to hurt a knee or something like that. And so this binding has a particular sequence to get it into walk mode. And then at the top, we'd go back into ski mode and we'd pop that heel down. So you can see this has a brake. You can remove the brake on this model, but I just left it on. I'm going to be area skiing with my kids and my wife and stuff and whatever. So I just left these on, and weight's not much of an issue. So now one thing on these touring bindings, when we're in walk mode, you can see under the heel of the boot, there's a silver plate that's elevating or it's a riser for the heel. On a steep uphill, if you put that little metal plate down, it'll make the hill seem a little less steep and it relieves some of the strain on your calves. So if I go back to that last slide, you can see the little metal plate is not down on the heel, and now it's down under the heel of the boot. And there's actually another one above that can go down and rise your heel even more, like that. So it's just a feature of touring bindings that you have what we call a heel riser or a lifter. Some people have different words for them, but different bindings have different systems for that too. So, okay, so now you see this binding is in ski mode. So the toe is in those pins and the heel is stepped into that heel piece, and you just stomp down just like you would a regular old, Alpine binding like that. So it's a little safer for the knees. They're a little heavier, but it does offer you the ability to tour and go uphill. So I often will have these, like we have a tram right here in Chamonix that goes way up in the mountains, and then we can do a big long run back to town. So I don't have to lug these uphill, but once I'm backcountry skiing, I want the ability to go back uphill. If somebody fell, was injured, they lost a ski, something like this, it's nice for me to be able to have a nice robust binding like this, but I could put this into walk mode, put skins on my skis and go back uphill to help somebody out, or maybe we don't like what the snow looks like that day, it's dangerous or something, we'll go back uphill. So this for me is a great balance if you're going to spend more time in the ski area, or maybe even 50-50, something like that. And again, Fritchie makes a different model that's similar to this one, that's a hybrid. Marker makes one, Solomon makes one called a Shift. There's a bunch of options. So, shop around, see what you think is going to suit you the most. But that's a little overview of bindings right there. All right, so now we've been stomping these boots in and out of bindings. So let's talk about touring boots. These are the two boots that I just happen to own. Again, bunch of good brands. This Technica boot, they make really good Alpine boots. They also make this touring boot. Dynafit is mostly a touring specific brand. So you see that's a smaller, lighter boot on the left. And the boot on the left weighs about 1,000 grams, so 2.2 pounds. The one on the right is, it's like 400 grams heavier. So almost a pound heavier. It definitely skis a bit better, but you see it has more buckles. It's a little heavier, whatever. So I just take them on different days. If I'm going for a gymongous tour where I'm going to have to climb for 5-6 hours out of the day, I'll probably take the boot on the left because it's way lighter and I'm a little bit lazy. But the one on the right skis really, really well, still tours very, very well. And for the performance it gives you, it's a phenomenally lightweight boot. So, but again, a little bit of research on how these boots fit and things like that is probably worth your time. So these are the main difference with these boots though, is that they go into this walk mode, right? So I'll show you a close up of this in a moment, but all that does is it allows your ankle to pivot back and forth. So you have more range fore and aft as you're touring. So they're way more comfortable to walk in. You can actually climb in them when we're booting up, a steep slope. But this gives you this walk option. So you can go forward and back, and that makes this sort of Nordic ski stride we do much, much easier. So just looking at those boots, you can see there's a rivet on the cuff there, and that thing will allow your ankle to flex forward and back. Typically they're quite a bit lighter and they're a little bit softer often. The boot on the right is almost as stiff as a pretty beefy Alpine boot, but they're often a bit softer as well than an Alpine boot you might be used to. So now here's part of the moment when I'm going to spend everybody's money. Okay, if there's one thing to spend cash on, it's going to be boots, because if your feet are not having a good day, you're not having a good day, period, right? So going uphill, you've got to have enough comfort that your feet don't get blisters, anything like that. It's like wearing a hiking boot. If you're going uphill for 2 hours and your foot is rubbing in a weird way, you're going to have a terrible day. And then on the down, you've got to be able to lock that boot down, tighten the buckles, and it's got to ski pretty well. So if you're going to spend money on anything, go to a good ski shop, a good backcountry ski shop who has an experienced boot fitter. Ask him or her, hey, this is the kind of skiing I'm going to do. She or he'll look at your feet. I have a really high arch, for example. Some people have big, wide, flat Fred Flintstone feet, whatever they are. But you can get into a boot that's going to fit you really, really well, and then they can heat mold it to your foot. So I know that sounds like a bit of a deal, but backcountry skiing, you really got to have your feet set up for success. Otherwise, you're going to have a terrible day. So if there's one thing to splurge on, I would say splurge on boots, right? So there's my sales pitch. I'm not making any commissions on this, but go for it. So now there's that walk mechanism on the back of one of those boots. Just like all the bindings, many of these things work slightly differently. So this is that Technica boot. You can see that little piece of string. When I want to go uphill in walk mode, I pull that thing up and it lets my cuff flex back and forth. At the top, when we're going to go down, I put that lever down, it clicks in, and now it's going to act like a traditional Alpine boot. So that's it. You know, the Dynafit has a slightly different walk mode. Scarpa has a slightly different walk mode. And those are all great boots. Scarpa, Dynafit, Technica, Solomon, they all make really, really good boots these days. Dalbello's a really good brand. You don't see it quite as much in the States, but I would say don't get suckered in by what is the sexiest thing in the shop. Buy what feels really good on your foot. So there you have it. Once you're into the sport a little bit more, if you're going to continue to do it, some of these boots have more or less serviceable buckles and walk mechanisms and things like that, because these boots are really, really light, so they do break more frequently than a normal Alpine boot. So touring or going on a trip, I'll often take a couple buckles with me in my repair kit on the sailboat in Norway, or I'll take them to a hut in Canada. That way, if somebody breaks a boot, we have a chance to fix it in the field, or maybe do it that night back at the hut. So now another way you can spend money is many of these boots come with a really lightweight liner to save weight. If you tend to have cold feet or your feet are a funny shape, then buying an aftermarket liner will allow you to heat mold it, and the boot fitter can do a lot more with your foot. So they can not only mold the shell a little bit, they can also heat mold the liner. So keep it in mind. It's definitely an indulgence, but I do it to all of my boots. You know, it adds, let's say it adds almost $200. So I know that's a lot, but again, if you're going to ski, 20 days a year, even, it's probably going to be worth it. You're going to be psyched. You're going to send me an email in 2 years and say, I spent $140 on a boot fitter and it was the best money I spent. So, all right. So let's dive into skins now. Now, this is probably for somebody who hasn't done any backcountry skiing, hasn't seen very much of it, this will be like a totally new piece of equipment for you. So these are called skins because originally they were made of seal skins. So when the first, it wasn't even Finland or Russia back then, it was just people 3,000 years ago. They literally had wooden skis, and this is, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, I think is how long ago people were doing this. They had wooden planks on their feet, and then they figured out that seal skin, all the hairs would lie down if you were sliding it one way, but then they would stand up if you were sliding backwards. So for literally millennia, they were seal skins. Around World War II, I think it was, no, must have been the 20th century, they figured out that mohair would also work. So there's mohair skins, and that's actually the skin of an animal. I think it's an Angora goat, and those work too. Those glide really, really well. People still ski on mohair skins. The skin you're looking at here is actually mohair, so that is a natural fiber. Then around World War II, a Swiss company figured out how to make them out of nylon. So now we have nylon skins, mohair skins, blends of the two, all this kind of stuff. But basically, they all work the same. They have little hairs on the bottom. If you slide it forward, all those hairs lay down. If you start to slide backwards, all those little hairs stand up, and believe it or not, you grip, right? So this is a contour skin. That's just a brand name. There's a bunch of good ones out there. On the underside of the skin, so there's what we call the plush, is that orange part. That's the part touching the snow. The underside has, most of the skins have an adhesive, and it's this gummy glue that you can see. I probably have, God, I don't know, 80 or 100 days on these skins. So you can see they've gotten a little dirty, this and that, but it's glue. So you do not want to drop these things in a pile of pine needles or dust or dirt because it will ruin the glue, and then you got a real problem on your hands. But they stick to the bottom of your ski. So we put them on when we want to go uphill, and they work really, really well. Then you get to the top, you peel them off the bottom of your ski. So some people will roll them up, put them in their backpack. If it's a really cold day, you might fold them over, put them inside your jacket because the glue likes to be warm. And then you ski down, get to the bottom, put them back on your skis, go back up again. So that would be on a day when we're like human powered touring or skinning or whatever you want to say, going uphill. But the skins just allow you to go uphill. Now, if we're going chairlift skiing or off the tram or heli skiing, something like that, I might have these in my backpack and be skiing one of those heavier hybrid bindings, because then the weight penalty is not that big a deal. I'm only going downhill with the skis, but if I need to go back uphill to help a buddy out, he fell or, you know, anything like that, I have the option to go do that. But that's basically skins, right? So you want to protect that glue. You want to dry them every night you use them. So take them out of your pack, open them up, and put them over a you know, a dowel or a, you know, a coat hanger, something like that, in a dry, warm room, and let them dry out overnight, and then store them. So when I say store them well, I mean they come with a little thing. It's this little, it's like a little plastic foot that goes between them. So for 1 or 2 days, you can put them glue side to glue side, leave them in your backpack after they're all dried out. But if you're going to store them for the summer or the winter, all of mine are back in my gear room right now with this little plastic sheet between them, sitting up on a shelf. You just don't put them any place too hot, something like that. So these are $150 a pop. So they're pretty expensive. You want to get as much life out of them as you can, right? So that's the tip of the skin you see right there, that little wire bail that goes over the shovel of your ski, spread it along the base, and then often they have a tail clip, which I'll show you next, there. And that tail clip is on the bottom there, that orange stretchy plastic thing, and that just snaps on the tail. This is a different skin. It's got a slightly different skin tip on it, but this is made by Pomoka, another great skin brand. And so, you know, all the tips and tails come in different configurations, things like this. So it just depends what you're psyched on, right? There is a newer type of skin out called a glueless or a hybrid skin. And they're starting to get really, really good. They don't have an actual adhesive on the bottom. So they tend to stay a bit cleaner. You can also wash them. You can see this skin, I've got little bits of pine needles and stuff on there. These are some of my older skins. You can see they're a little beat up. But the hybrid skins are nice because you can wash them off. You got to take care of them when you're out skiing, keep them dry and warm, but they work really, really well. And we're on like generation 3 of those. So they get better every iteration, right? So glue or glueless, I would say for your first pair of skins, if you buy glue, traditional skins, they'll be great. And, you know, just get familiar with how the tip and the tail attachments work. And there's a bunch of options. Nylon tends to grip a little better going uphill. Mohair tends to be a little faster glide. If you want to do both, you can get them made, you know, 70%, 30%, one or the other. So they make a blend of the two. So try to keep them clean, take care of them, and that'll get you through definitely a few seasons with skins, right? All right, so now let's dive into avalanche gear. So you hear this all the time, beacon, shovel, probe. Everybody's going skiing with beacon, shovel, probe, which is a great idea, right? So the beacon, like I said, some people will call it a transceiver. I would say as long as you get a modern, new beacon, this is another piece of gear you probably want to just buy new so you can be the original owner and know it's taken care of. There's a bunch of great companies making them. Pieps is having a recall issue with one of their models right now. You see that upper beacon is called a Pieps. That's a brand name. They're made in Austria. Very high quality beacons. One of their beacons has a faulty switch right now. And so they're fighting with people about warranties and things like this. But I would avoid that one. It's called the DSP, I believe. But this little beacon is called a Pieps Micro. I love it. I ski with it all the time. It's great. But all the modern beacons are really reliable, really accurate. They work really, really well. So I'll talk about them in just a sec. Shovels are pretty self-explanatory, other than you will occasionally see them made of plastic or carbon fiber. You cannot buy those. They break as soon as you're digging in real avalanche debris. And if your shovel breaks and God forbid your buddy's buried, it's a death sentence, right? So what I would say is buy one that's either steel blade, maybe aluminum, and then that handle you see right below the shovel blade, that thing actually extends. It has a telescoping handle. And that's probably worth it. you know, in an avalanche rescue, most of the rescue is spent digging, believe it or not. So you want to get a shovel that, you know, that handle comes out and it's got a durable blade so you can really dig. And the probes down below, those are all folded up. So when we unfurl that, it works like a tent pole. Like you go backpacking, you know, and your tent goes snap, 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 into like a longer tent pole. These probes work the same way. You unfurl that thing, tighten it, and it becomes a long 240, 260, maybe 320 centimeter probe, right? So once we get close to our victim, we start probing in the snow. And these beacons are designed, or sorry, these probes are designed to, you know, hit the person, you'll feel it. And once you probe a little bit for targets and buried backpacks and things on an avalanche course or something, you will really quickly get, you know, the hang of it and feel like, okay, that's a person, that's not the ground or whatever like that. They make them in carbon fiber these days. And I would say for your first probe, just get an aluminum one. That top one, the red and gold one, is aluminum. It'll last you a bit longer. They're a bit more durable. The carbon ones are nice, but they do break. I've seen them break quite a bit actually, and they're more expensive. So I would say just save the cash, get an aluminum one for your first time. So when we're buying these transceivers and beacons, I hear this all the time. What's the best one? Well, I would say Backcountry Access, Peeps, Mammut, Ortovox, they all make really, really good transceivers beacons. And whatever you get, look at it, see if you like the shape of it, maybe try to use it in the store a little bit so you get a sense of what the display is like. But once you have it, you need to practice with that beacon and really figure out how it works and what its functions are, because you don't want to buy a beacon that's so complicated you can't use the darn thing. So, but most of the big brands now are really, really good. So I would just say stick with what, you know, seems like an appropriate model for you. When you have it, treat it like an iPhone, right? We don't throw our iPhone in the back of the car at the end of the day with our wet ski boots. You know, if we're out skiing with our iPhone, we don't set it down in the snow and let the water like accumulate on the screen, things like that. So don't bang it, bump it, let it get wet. Don't chuck it to your friend through the air or whatever. Take care of them because it's a piece of safety equipment. Read the owner's manual, right? So make sure you know what kind of batteries it takes. There are a couple models that'll take a lithium ion battery. I cannot remember. I don't think any of them are taking rechargeable batteries yet. I might be wrong about that. But all of them, you know, have different configurations. One model that I really, really like, the Backcountry Access one, the trackers, those are great beacons. They don't take, all they take is the regular alkaline, like Duracell batteries. That's great. No problem. But you got to know which one, because if you put the wrong batteries in your beacon, it's going to malfunction, which is not what we want, right? So they come with a bunch of different functions on them. Some of them are simpler, some have more complicated features. So figure out, does the beacon mark? Does it have a trailhead function? And once you do an avalanche course, you'll know what all these terms mean. But definitely don't go into the gear shop and let the kids sell you the $600 beacon with all the bells and whistles for your first one, because you probably won't need all that extra stuff, right? So just take your time with it. And then once you have it, practice with it, right? There are beacon parks where you can go where they have buried transceivers in the snow, and you search with yours and then probe and hit a target, and then you get an alarm that tells you hit it. Then you don't dig it up. Don't do that. The ski patrollers don't like that. But in Colorado, there's, 6 or 8 of these beacon parks. I know there's a couple in Tahoe. I know there are some out in the Northwest. In Europe, there's definitely one here right above Chamonix, up here in the Brévent, and Verbier has one. So they're all over the place. Just ask the local ski patrol or Google around, you'll find it. But practicing with the beacons, you'll see it's pretty easy to get good. And then what you really want to do is figure out how you're going to shovel a person who's buried a meter deep. And there's ways to do this. So we're not going to cover it in this talk tonight, but a good avalanche course or a rescue course will teach you how to do that. So, all right, so you got all of this gear. I've spent a bunch of your money. Now we got to put it in a backpack, right? So if you want to buy a dedicated ski backpack, no problem. There's nothing miraculous about them. They have a couple features that'll help you organize your stuff. This is a backpack made by Blue Ice, and it has a little sleeve on that back outside. So it'd be on the farthest part from you that just folds down, and you have your shovel, your probe, and your shovel handle all in that little tools pocket, we call it, right? So you just want to make sure it's a comfortable pack. It feels good on your back. If you're, let's say, under the height of like 5'8" or something, 5'7", definitely try it on in the shop, because some of these packs have longer backs. Some of them are shorter. So like my son is 10 years old. He's crazy about skiing. So we went and got him the smallest women's pack I could find, because it had a slightly shorter back. So, you know, if you're under, say, 5'8" or something, try on a bunch of different packs and don't just assume they're going to fit you, because some of them are longer, shorter, narrower, whatever. And likewise, if you're really, really tall, some of the packs come in longer back lengths too. So make sure it's big enough. If you tend to run cold while you're skiing, get it a little oversized. This one's a 25-liter pack. If you got a 32-liter pack, then you can get your big, giant, puffy jacket in there. You know, carry some extra stuff, because you are going to have more stuff with you than you certainly would lift skiing, something like that. So make it comfortable, big enough. You might want to have a tools pocket if you think you're going to get into skiing and go quite a bit. Most of my ski packs have this tools pocket on the back like that. And then if you're going to really pursue it and you think you're going to, you know, start booting up steeper terrain come springtime when the snow is stable, most of these ski packs have a way of affixing skis to the outside. So just, you know, you'll go to the gear shop, they're going to have way too many choices for you. So just have a look and do that. And remember to practice with your shovel, right? So you'll see those beacons are really, really easy to use these days. They're very fast and accurate, but the shoveling is what's going to take you a bunch of time. So practice with your shovel. All right. So that's a huge overview of gear. If I was talking too fast or something didn't make sense, then email me. I'll try to get it sorted out with you. But spend some money on boots. I would say probably spend money on a new Avalanche transceiver and practice with it. Those would be my two giant takeaways from that whole first section. So now that we got all that stuff, you got to figure out where you're going to go, right? So one of the really cool developments over the last 10, 12 years is ski areas are now allowing us uphill access or uphill travel. So, you know, in Colorado, Winter Park allows it. Arapahoe Basin has been allowing it. I don't know what Loveland's policy is going to be this year, but you know, out in Tahoe, the Northwest, down in New Mexico, everywhere. The easiest way to get used to your gear is to go out to the ski hill and do a couple laps up and down. So you get the hang of the bindings, your walk mode in your boots, your skins, all that. And then you're in controlled terrain. You don't have to worry about avalanches, where you're going to ski. You can just skin up on whatever uphill track they tell you to use. And then you get to ski down on the piste, the ski run. And so it's a great way to get into it, right? So once you're ready to start, you know, venturing out a little bit more, you got to think about where you're going to go. So the main thing is you do not want to end up in avalanche terrain, right? Because that's a whole nother set of considerations. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but here's my buddy Paul skiing up in Canada. This is on a pretty low angle slope. This is not an avalanche slope. It's not prone to avalanching. It doesn't avalanche, and the skiing looks pretty fun, right? So for these first couple seasons, certainly your first few times out, just don't go skiing on avalanche slopes, right? Now you're probably already thinking ahead, like, well, how do I know what's an avalanche slope? So we're going to talk a little bit about that, right? But there's Paul skiing, having a good time. We had a blast. This was last year in Canada. This was like such a fun crew, and we had a great week. So where we go ski and split board, it really determines two things, right? Are we going to get quality turns? Is there good snow where we're going? And there's, you know, there's some ways of figuring this out. Paritza was asking me earlier, hey, you know, Paritza is not much of a skier. So he was asking, how do you guys figure out where the good snow is? And definitely there are people on the internet. Joel Gratz is one of them who's, you know, really forecasts who's going to get the best snow out of this next storm. And he does that for ski hills and wherever. The avalanche centers, I'll talk about those in a little bit, will often tell you who got the most snow out of these last storms and things like this. But guidebooks, friends, things like that will tell you, hey, there's good skiing here, there's good skiing there, things like that. Now, the other thing that we need to consider, we don't just go looking for deep snow and turn off our brains, right? As soon as we're going to go into avalanche terrain, we need to make sure we're ready to do that, right? So if it's your first season skiing in the backcountry, maybe you have not done any avalanche training, you've never skied with a guide, something like that, I would just say don't risk having any exposure to avalanche terrain for your first you know, season or two. There's plenty of places to go without you know, having to really up the hazard, you know? So this is another big pro tip. Are you ready for this? take out your phone, take a photo of the slide. If you're not an avalanche terrain, you can't get killed by an avalanche. That's as wise as it's going to get. There you go. So I'm trying to highlight this in the sense that if you just don't go in avalanche terrain, then you can put that out of your consciousness for the first season or two. So guidebooks will help you do that. We'll talk about a little bit about how to do that on your own, things like that. But you really want to just dial that back. You're getting used to your gear. You're getting used to like long days where you're having to go uphill, things like this. So adding avalanche hazard on top of that really turns it into a bit of an overwhelming task for your first few times. You know, I grew up in Colorado, and I have to say my friends and I were just clueless back in the day, right? So you're 17, you're with your buddies, and you're all psyched, and you start going under ropes and things at the ski area. It's like lucky we never had an accident or anything like that. So your first season, I would say, just stay out of avalanche terrain, and then you're not going to get buried in avalanche, right? It's rare. I've never been in an avalanche. I've not been buried in an avalanche. I haven't been tumbled off my feet in an avalanche. I've been around a couple small ones. So I don't want you to think it's any part of like regular backcountry skiing, but definitely for your first season or two, just don't risk it, you know? All right, so I've been hammering that one, like correctly identifying what avalanche terrain is. We'll talk about that in just a second, how to identify it and what it is not. And then the next thing maybe you start to incorporate into your day is checking that avalanche bulletin every day. So in Colorado, you know, Salt Lake, these places, they all have the Northwest, Jackson, Crested Butte, they all have a really active, fantastic avalanche center. So they issue a bulletin daily starting about this time of the year. And they will give you a sense of, are there avalanches happening? Is there a lot of avalanche hazard out there? And start reading that on a daily basis. You can have an email to your inbox. So you get up in the morning, you go to work, whatever, and at least glance at the thing and just keep an eye on, you know, are people triggering avalanches? What kind of storms are happening? Things like that. You can really start to get into the flow of watching how the season develops and things like that, right? So those would be two things to focus on: avalanche terrain and checking the bulletin every day for this first year, right? So talking about avalanche terrain. Now in North America, right, certainly in Colorado and the lower 48, we have a ski area, right? So this is A Basin. This is a great little ski hill in Colorado if you haven't been there. A wonderful place. I've been skiing there since I was a little punk. And they have a really fun scene there. They have uphill access. They have like ski mountaineering races, meaning you uphill with your skins on, then you ski down. It's just a cool place. But you can see on the map here, there's a clearly defined boundary. And once you're out there skiing, if there's a fence up that says closed, you know, okay, we're not going to go in there, right? So anywhere on the hill that's open has been controlled by the ski patrollers and is, you know, theoretically safe terrain, right? So it's pretty clearly defined in North America. If you're in the ski area boundary, you're probably going to be fine. Now on a huge powder day, I'll be honest, I ski with a Beacon Shovel Pro with my friends, you know, certainly now that I'm skiing with my sons, right? And so you just, you know, it's a little bit of an easier task in North America. If you're inbounds on an open run, chances are the ski patrollers have checked it, or it's just not avalanche terrain at all. So it makes it pretty easy, right? Now, as soon as we go to Europe, this is skiing in Latour, right up above Chamonix. If you look back there by the ski lift, right by the chair lift, you can see a bunch of people on just a little stripe of snow there that's a little more packed down than the rest. So that's what we call on-piste in Europe, right? Which means off-piste is right outside of that ski run. Now, here's the tricky thing in Europe. Anywhere off that piste is uncontrolled by ski patrol. So that could mean you're on a glacier with crevasses. That could mean you're on an avalanche slope that hasn't been bombed. So we're within sight of the ski hill. We skied over here without even putting skins on, but we are in uncontrolled off-piste snow at this point. So we're on our own, right? The ski patrollers haven't bombed anything. They're not telling us if we're safe or not. They haven't cleared this run of like rocks or stumps in the off season. So this is uncontrolled terrain. So there's different terms for this in North America. Some people will say backcountry, slack country, side country, off piste. In Europe, we usually say off piste, but this means as soon as you slide off that piste, that marked ski run, you're on your own, right? So this is the danger of skiing in Europe a little bit. Americans come over and are not accustomed to this, you know, oh, well, there was no fence, there was no boundary line. I didn't see that. And you remember a couple of years ago, a couple young guys on the ski team, the U.S. national ski team, were killed skiing off-piste in Switzerland. And they just kind of had, hey, we're out skiing, there's powder, let's go skiing. And they didn't really realize that they were in uncontrolled terrain. So those are some terms you're here: off-piste, backcountry, side country, slack country. To me, it's either you're in the ski area or you're in the backcountry. So as soon as we're out there, we're kind of on our own. So just keep that in mind. As soon as you slide out of the ski area through the gates or whatever, you got to be making your own decisions. So, for your first season, if you're going to do that, just make sure you're on non-avalanche terrain. And I would say probably don't be skiing on a glacier at first, even. That's another discussion where you got to worry about crevasses and things like that too. But we can go backcountry skiing in loads of places where there's no avalanche hazard, there are no crevasses, and it's a relatively easy terrain to manage and see and do things like that. So some other things to think about: don't just follow the crowd that first year, because you're going to see people doing dumb stuff. And that is just the reality of it. This upcoming year is going to be really crowded in the backcountry, and you're going to see people going all over the place. So take it slow. Just because there's tracks leading off into the distance and it looks fun doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea. This is the top of the tram here in Chamonix. So you can see everybody walks out of the tram and comes down this big, steep, scary slope. And then as soon as you step over that little fence line, you're on a glacier skiing, right? So, oftentimes there's mountain guides out here working and stuff like this, and pretty competent skiers, but you just want to make sure you're not following somebody into a situation where you're not, that psyched, right? So there's going to come a day too where the skiing looks really, really good, and you're going to be really, really psyched. And just remember, backcountry skiing involves a bunch more hazard beyond like skiing in the area. So when your stoke level gets up to 10 out of 10, just take a step back and ask yourself, okay, is this a manageable situation? Do I know what I'm doing? Am I in avalanche terrain? Things like that. So take it slow, right? Okay. Now, on a high danger day as well, if you start reading that bulletin, you're going to see a day where the danger rating goes up in terms of number or color or by name, right? There's 5 avalanche danger ratings. And on those days where the danger's getting up there, level 3, 4, 5, something like that, the forecasters are going to be warning you about different hazards. But you can see this is a beautiful tour up in Canada, really low angle slope. There's no avalanche hazard right here. And on a high danger day, this would be a totally appropriate slope to be skiing on and taking it easy on. So, there's going to be those days where you just don't go out skiing. The safest option is just to go to the ski hill or not go anywhere, and don't brave the highway and the blizzard conditions, right? So now we talked about how to identify all this avalanche terrain, right? So there's a bunch of resources to do this. And once you take a good avalanche course, a level 1 avalanche course, we'll talk about that in a sec, you are going to have a better idea about how to do this. So there's guidebooks for all over the place. I mean, I've got a whole shelf of them up here in French and German and Italian and whatnot. And I spent a bunch of time trying to decipher them. But all over North America, there's really helpful guidebooks. Fritz Sperry has some super ones in Colorado, and Doug Sproul's book up for Rogers Pass in Canada. I mean, these are phenomenal resources that will tell you not only where to find good skiing, but they're going to give you an idea about where the hazards lie, right? So guidebooks are going to be really helpful. Maps, it's really not that difficult to determine a steeper and lower angle slope on a map. It requires a little bit of coaching, but that's going to be one way you could look at a ski slope on the map and determine, like, hey, is this a steeper or a shallower angle slope? Once you do a ABBY awareness course or a level 1 avalanche course, you're going to learn that avalanches most often happen on slopes 30 degrees and steeper. So if you can limit your skiing to slopes, let's say 25 degrees and under, and don't be on slopes connected to steeper slopes above you, that removes the avalanche hazard from your life right there. And there's a million places to ski that are low angle, safe, and wonderful, right? So that would be from maps and guidebooks. And then once you're in the field, we have a bunch of different ways. Like once you get good at it, you can use your eyes and kind of look at it and say, oh, that slope's a little steeper or lower angle. But we also have, everybody probably has a smartphone that's sitting there at home right now. Inside your smartphone is a clinometer, right? Which just measures slope angle. You might have used it on household projects or something like that. But you can lay your ski pole down on a slope, put your phone on it, and it'll give you a rough idea of that little section of slope. Now, you don't want to ski out onto a slope and take the slope angle, but as you're skiing around on smaller slopes, you can be laying that pole down and putting the iPhone on there and start really calibrating your eyes for what's a 25-degree slope look like? What does a 35-degree slope like? Just a little piece of terrain like the side of a skin track or something you can look at and say, oh, that's what a 40-degree slope would look like. And you're going to start really getting your eyes tuned to that. And then if you can identify a slope, keep it at 25 degrees, you're going to keep yourself at a avalanche terrain for, I do that every day I'm out skiing. And I look at slopes, oh, that seems steeper. Maybe I'll go left or right and just avoid that little patch, right? So that's some ideas on ski terrain and how to keep yourself in and out of avalanche terrain. Let's just keep out of avalanche terrain for this first season at least. And now let's think about, you're going to go skiing, you got to go skiing with somebody, right? So you got to have a little bit of a team and put in some prep. That's my buddy Tim skiing up there in Canada. And that's actually Tim and I standing above the slope he was just on. We were just talking about how we were going to get a big group down there. And so you got to be careful about who you're skiing with, because some partners make, just like everything, you go on a bike ride with your buddy who is an ex-Tour de France guy, he's going to crush you, right? And so that's sometimes fun. Other times you just don't want to go out with that guy and you just want to ride slow and have a nice day, right? And so you want to think about who you're skiing with, and we'll talk a little bit about how you might pick ski partners, right? So, we all want to go out and have fun. Like, that's the bottom line, right? So you want to be out with people that don't flake, that are easy to talk to, and, fun to be around. You can work with them. And, if you can go out with your buddy who's an EMT or a wilderness first responder or something, that's great. Then you've got a medical trained person along. If you have somebody that's really good with their beacon, awesome. If you have somebody that's involved with search and rescue, great. And, if you're just going out for the first time with a buddy, well, go with somebody that is going to be willing to talk to you and be patient and make smart decisions as you're out there touring around, right? So get a good little group chemistry going and go with folks you trust, right? Okay, some other things to think about. If your buddy is trying to land his first backflip in the backcountry and you're just figuring out your bindings for the first day, well, you're not going to make very good touring partners for that day, right? So go out with similar goals and skills in mind. And, that's my nephew there. That's me in the orange jacket there, the Rab jacket. And my nephew is right next to me on my right. So he's a young charger and he's super fit. And, it's not going to be long here until he's leaving me for dead. But he's a great guy to tour with when I want to go big. But if he and his buddies are out and they want to go ice climbing or go huge in the backcountry and I'm feeling like sluggish, he's not my favorite touring partner, right? Because he's young and strong and super stoked all the time, right? So pick these guys appropriately, and risk tolerance is a huge one, right? If you are talking about going backcountry skiing and this person has a bunch of stories about avalanches and near misses and, lost skis and injuries, that might not be the best person for you. And just think about, does that person have fun doing the same things you do? Like, do they find it really enjoyable to limp back to the car after dark? Or do they like to be back an hour early so they have a little bit of a buffer in case somebody loses a ski or, whatever the case is. So try to put together a good team and with people you can work with, right? And once you got that little posse together, you want to probably sit down and have a chat. Again, a good avalanche course is going to show you how to do a lot of these things and use checklists and things like that. But think about a little med kit. Is anybody in your group asthmatic? Do you have a diabetic along? Things like that. Do you have a repair kit with you so you could fix a basic thing? Like maybe all you need is some baling wire, a Leatherman, a couple ski straps, things like this. But then make sure you're checking the bulletin. Make sure you have a really good sense of where you're going to be avoiding avalanche terrain. Is there avalanche terrain around you that you want to be careful of? Things like that. Make sure it's a good group you can chat with. And I would say, in terms of, if this is your first season backcountry skiing, if you're an intermediate or black skier in the resort, you're probably going to have a pretty good time in the backcountry. There will be days where the snow is really weird and you're going to get your butt kicked. I still do it. Everything, you get weird conditions and your skis are submarining and you're falling all over the place. It happens. Believe me. Don't think you're going to ski deep powder for the rest of your life in the backcountry. So, do the best you can. But if you're an intermediate skier in the area, you'll probably have a pretty good time skiing in the backcountry, And in terms of basic fitness, if you can go on a 3-hour hike, you're probably fine to go backcountry skiing. It's going to be tiring your first time uphill. You're going to have a lot of weight on your feet. but just pick a place that's mellow. You know, try to follow a low angle skin track in safe terrain, or put in your own skin track that's low angle. Don't feel like you got to go straight up the hill, and just wander around a little bit and have some fun, and you'll get the hang of it pretty quick. So I said this isn't an avalanche course, so here we are. I'm just going to give you some overview about where you can get some avalanche training and do some coursework if you're into it, right? So typically folks will go to an avalanche awareness, like little chat at a gear shop. Maybe it's an hour long or something like that. And that's a great starter, right? And we touched on a few of the things here. Avalanches happen on slopes that are generally steeper than 30 degrees. You want to be reading the bulletin, things like that. You guys know there's a hazard out there in the backcountry. So if you want to make the jump, though, the level 1 is typically taught over 3 days. So it's a 24-hour course. Half that time spent in the field, right? There's a bunch of them in Colorado. There's bunches of them up in the Northwest, Utah, down in Tahoe, out of Bishop. If you don't know where to go, give me a shout and I'll help you out. Avalanche.org is a great resource that shows you all the forecast centers in the country where you can start reading the bulletin, but it'll give you some information on avalanche courses. And I'll give you, there's a slide later that has a bunch of these URLs. So that would be a first step. It'd be that level 1 avalanche course that's going to teach you how to identify terrain, give you an introduction on how to read the bulletin, how to apply that in the field in terms of making decision about what kind of terrain to avoid, things like that. And then providers are teaching a rescue component now. It's just a 1-day, 8-hour course, and that's really focused on the transceiver searching, shoveling, probing, and a rescue response. So those are important skills, because I will tell you eventually, if you do it long enough, you're going to blow it. I've blown it before. I blow it every season doing something. Fortunately, it hasn't really bit me in the butt or anything. But we make mistakes, right? So you got to have those rescue skills. And then there's a level 2, also a 24-hour course that you can do. And that would be the next step after, let's say, 2, 3, 4 seasons of touring, and you're really psyched on the activity. And then that would be a great next step. And then something we've been doing the last few years is teaching a full immersion hut-based level 2 up in Canada. So these are either 5 or 6 days long. We bring a chef in there, you get helicoptered in, and then it's all human powered touring. And it's just 5 or 6 days of full touring. We wake up every day, do a big tour plan, talk about the danger. Then we go out and tour, we come back, debrief it, talk about what we did great, what we did wrong. And then we have a big dinner together. It's cool. And I know online this year, there's a bunch of great avalanche resources. And my buddy Richard Bothwell is doing an avalanche webinar on November the 18th on the San Francisco Backcountry Facebook group. So you can chat with him. His name's down there on the bottom of the slide, Richard Bothwell. He's on Facebook. He's on my friends list. Shoot him an email. Tell him this kook Rob said you're doing something cool. So he'll set you straight. And then there's a bunch of other great courses and reading and things like that going on this year as well. And I'll give you some reading ideas here in a sec. So that's kind of an overview of avalanche education in North America. The Canadians have slightly different terms, but they're loosely the same format. In Europe, it's a little more ad hoc between different countries. If you're over here and you're interested in it, shoot me an email and let's chat, because there's definitely opportunities down here up in Switzerland as well. And we can chat about that. So, you know, as you get into the sport, you're going to want to think about, hey, at what point can I go do this on my own? Right. And in talking to clients of mine that have, you know, progressed through the ranks, most of them after a while do a level 1 avalanche course. They get really familiar with the bulletin, and then they get into this process where they have their own, you know, really sort of daily routine they get in for a day of skiing. You know, if you're buying skis this year or buying a car or something, you probably have your routine, like maybe you read online reviews or you get consumer reports or you do something like that. So we have that same process for going backcountry skiing. How do we figure out where are avalanches happening? What kind of terrain do we want to avoid? Who am I going with? You know, how do I get a weather forecast? You know, what repair, safety gear, all that kind of stuff am I going to take? And that, you know, that's how we do it as professionals. And that's how, you know, really savvy recreationalists do it too. So I would say take that rescue practice. And another great option, it's a little bit spendy. I don't want to make light of it, but hiring a guide for a day. If you get 4 or 5 of your friends together, it gets to be pretty affordable. But if you go with a guide, she can like completely tailor the day for what you're looking for. If it's your first season and you just want to get used to your skins and bindings and all that, great, go do it. Once you've done it for a while though, and you're starting to say, hey, well, the bulletin was talking about, wind slabs on this type of terrain. I would like to go see some of that. Really skilled mountain guide can take you out and show you that kind of stuff. So, get 4 of your friends together, go do something like that. It'd be like a relatively affordable, but really in-depth focused day for you. And, there's mentors out there and you can meet people online, but just be a little bit careful who you go with, right? Like I said, if they're telling you about near misses and avalanches they've been in, then maybe you avoid that person for the first couple of seasons until you can make your own decision about how they're doing it, right? So yeah, and keep your psych level in check there. So I'll give you a little overview of my buddy Cooper. Cooper and I skied together the first time, geez, I bet you 7 years ago, something like that. And Cooper started skiing as an adult. So he did not grow up in Colorado, getting to ski all over the place, whatever. And Cooper has really progressed through a level 1, a level 2, and a bunch of training on his own, both climbing and skiing. And he has now skied all over the world. This is Cooper. We were skiing together in Svalbard. That's a glacier down behind us that stretches for as far as you can see. We did this ski run and then actually saw a polar bear about an hour later. It was so cool. But Cooper really started out as what I would call a pretty inexperienced intermediate skier. And we have now done trips to Norway and in Europe, and here's Canada skiing with Coop. And he has done a bunch of his own avalanche training and got really, really competent on his own. So much so that he went and did one of the first, or one of the only ski ascent and descents of Mount Waddington in California in the last 3 years on his own with a buddy, no guide, no nothing. So it's really been cool to see Cooper really become almost a peer to me, skiing out there. And I've got some video here of Coop skiing. Let's see if it'll load here. My internet's a little tweaky here in Chamonix, but yeah. This is Cooper skiing up above Sunrise Lodge in British Columbia 2 winters ago. Yeah. And this was just a stellar trip. The skiing was like this every single day. We never crossed tracks. And it was so cool. So anyway, that's just a little glimpse of what you can do over the course of a few seasons skiing. Cooper's really been diligent, and his big passion is skiing. And, he's married, he has a great job and owns his own company and all this, but he, pulled it off and is really a really competent skier on his own now. So be like Cooper, that's what I'm saying. So here's some resources for you. So this webinar will be recorded and then you can watch it later, or you can just, crack out your phone and take a photo of this right now. But these are a few books I would recommend reading. Of those 3, that first one, Doug Littmer's Guide to Avalanche Terrain, is really cool. It's an ebook. So you're going to download it onto your computer, and then it's got a bunch of videos. It's got all sorts of cool stuff. It's really, really sharp. And the layout is a little clunky when you download it, but you're probably better with that stuff than me. But it's just really, really well done. He's a avalanche professional up in Canada. The other 2 books, Bruce Jameson's new book, he's doing a new edition of that book is coming out. He is one of the foremost snow science academics on the planet, really high end. And that book is geared towards us, though, folks who aren't doing snow physics with him in the lab. That'll be a really cool resource when it comes out. Look for the updated edition. And then Bruce Tremper used to run the Avalanche Center in Utah. That's a great book. That's probably the most widely read avalanche book in the United States, I would say right now. And I think it's on the 3rd edition now. It's really cool. So get that avalanche training, find a course. You'll hear about AAI is the American Avalanche Institute. ARI is another large provider. They do courses in Colorado, all over New England. So they're a great resource. They're avtraining.org. That's the ARI site. AAI, you can find AmericanAvalancheInstitute.com. And, look on social media. Some of the forecast centers post really cool videos and things like that, but be a little bit careful. Just some random Joe posting videos out there. I see some kooky stuff every so often. So Facebook's fun, but heads up, just be discerning with what you're consuming. And then my buddy Will has a really cool blog that he worked on all this fall, geared towards this exact audience, like folks that are psyched on getting out there skiing the first time. So wherethefruitis.com, you can find Will's blog. He's an outdoor educator, but an avid backcountry skier as well. So he has a real conversational, great style. And that'd be useful for people to read as well. So hit me if you need some help getting any of that stuff figured out, and I'll help you. So And these are all things that will help you start developing the skills you need to get out there on your own and ski in some bigger terrain. This is the Gran Paradiso National Park in Italy. You can see this is a very deep day. That's my buddy John. This was a phenomenal couple days skiing. We were actually skiing out to the road here to escape because they were going to get another meter of snow over the next 2 days. And everything was going to be shut down from avalanche hazard. So we had a really fun run out, but we were sort of tucking tail and getting out of there before we got stuck. But, you know, making decisions like that will come in time. Just take it slow and get educated. And then as you get into different terrain, this is skinning in a whiteout on a glacier. Not the most enjoyable morning, but you'll start to get the skills necessary to do bigger objectives like this. And you can get some climbing training, learn your rope systems, things like that, if that interests you. If it doesn't, no stress, don't do it. Or hire a guide on these days. I'll carry the rope for you. And we'll go out there and do it. But these are challenging days. You just want to make sure you have the skills for it. There's my buddy Martin skiing. This is outside of Sorcerer Lodge. This was probably the second best day I've ever had skiing in Canada. It was pretty great. And actually the best day I've ever had skiing in Canada was in this exact terrain this last winter and pre-COVID. And yeah, this is Sorcerer Lodge. If you ever get a chance to go to Sorcerer Lodge, that is one of the great operations in Canada. But you know, you got to be really careful skiing with that much snow on the ground in a big storm cycle. So, and this was in fact, right after this day, we went into a humongous avalanche cycle. It was spooky. So we took it very, very easy the next couple of days like that. And yep, there's some more skiing over here in Europe with my buddy Mikey. And Mike's a North Face athlete and a professional mountain guide. And that's, he and I were setting the track there and talking about terrain and hazards and things like that. So you just want to get your avalanche sort of brain going here before you get into bigger terrain like that. And eventually come to Chamonix, and this is the Vallée Blanche, what they say is the world's most famous ski run. My friend Ali there skiing down a really just sublime day skiing in the backcountry right there. So then places like that will open up for you. And just remember, it's all about having fun. It is not worth dying for. So I want you all to take it easy, stay out of avalanche terrain, relax, and have a great season this year. There is my email address down below, info@vetamountainguides.com. That's my website. And that's my Instagram up there. So, you know, I post stuff on 57 hours and run trips through with my 57 hours teammates. And I've actually, we did a Canada trip with the two of the founders, and then my other buddy, Perica, up there. And your screen is more of a climber, so I can't wait to go to Croatia and climb with him. But I've teamed up with those guys, so follow them on Instagram as well. And we have a few minutes for Q&A right now. I know it's run a tiny bit long because I get going talking, but I'm happy to hang out and answer any questions you want. And I actually have some skis, boots, skins in the room with me. So if you want to dork out, I can hold them up to the camera and we can figure stuff out. But shoot me an email if we didn't get to your question tonight or during the webinar, and we can correspond.
All right, Rob. Well, thanks a lot. I think you can stop screen sharing so we see you when we answer the questions. We did get a bit overboard with time, so I guess that's become a habit here, but we'll work on that. So sorry for people who had to drop off. We are still at 400 people, so a lot of people stayed all the way.
Oh, cool.
So thank you for the presentation and all the details. And I would say personally, especially the advice on like taking safety seriously. And let's dive into a few questions. I mean, we actually have over 70 questions, so we'll try to pick a few. But
so,
one,
Perica, do you want me to like get out of my slideshow so you can see my?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I said like try to stop screen sharing so we can see you, and then let's talk.
All right, let's see if I can figure this out without.
On the top, you should have a stop. Actually, I can probably.
Yeah, you can probably do it as the.
Wait a second. Yeah, you have the stop screen share on the top. Let me see. Stop. Okay, I'll do it for you. All right. All right, we see you, Rob, now with the skis and the okay, in the back. Cool. Okay, so some people are dropping off, but they say thank you, great presentation, and thank you as well for 57 hours. But look, I will start with a question from John in the audience. So he's actually asking about why should you, about the difference between going out with a guide like yourself or maybe doing this on your own. I think you touched upon that, but can you maybe elaborate a bit, like why would you hire a guide, and if you don't, what then?
Yeah. So yeah, great question. I definitely grew up kind of doing it, do it yourself, and for better or for worse, I survived. So I would say going out with a guide can be expensive, you know, if there's no way around that. Like, you know, a day with me skiing up above Chamonix is 500 euros. It's a chunk, right? And you get 4 of your friends together, it starts to get a little bit more reasonable. You know, so the cost is realistic. I don't want to like downplay that or something. The nice thing about going with a guide is she or he is going to have a bunch of things on their radar that you might not know about, right? So people come to Chamonix and they want to ski the Vallée Blanche. I mean, that's a long glacier run, right? So you got to be thinking about what happens if somebody falls in a crevasse, where are the crevasses, things like that. So you have these hazards and things. I would say in general, you're going to be safer out skiing with a guide than you would just winging it, you know, with a bunch of guys you meet in the parking lot or something like that. Now, most of you are going to be sensible and, you know, have friends you want to go skiing with. You know, and that's a totally reasonable approach. And let's say a level 1 avalanche course, or if you're in Canada, an AST1 is going to run you between 300 and 500 bucks. I would say that's a pretty worthwhile investment on that first year, because it's just going to give you a sort of an overview and a process that you can use with your buddies as you start taking smaller and smaller steps. And, you know, little steps getting into the backcountry. First day, you do a couple-hour tour where you just do some uphill at the resort. By the end of the year, maybe you're doing, you know, a good 5-hour tour with a couple of runs in it and you're having a good time. And doing it that way is totally viable. And I would just say, you know, make sure whatever terrain you're going into, you know what that terrain's like, you know if it's avalanche prone, you know what the danger rating is, stuff like that. Where I think a guide becomes really, really helpful is if you want to accelerate that process a little bit and say, hey, I just want to go skiing and watch where you ski and see what, you know, just think out loud, tell me what you're doing. That can be a really informative, instructive way to pick up some things that the guide's doing. Everything from how she bundles up her skis at the end of the day to, you know, throw them on the backpack to, you know, identifying wind slabs in the terrain, right? Once you do an avalanche course, you'll have all this jargon and these avalanche problems to manage and things like that. And so, you know, working with a guide that's patient and willing to talk to you before your day out, you could really customize the day. Let's say you get 3 or 4 friends together, everybody throws in $100, $125, whatever it is, and you go out and you could just do on, hey, how do I dig a pit to see what the avalanche forecasters are describing in the bulletin? You could spend an awesome day doing that and get some turns in. And so I think skiing with a guide or climbing with a guide, whatever, really has the potential to accelerate and sort of fast track your learning and to identify next steps that you could take and maybe weaknesses in whatever process you're doing. I go out with mentors all the time. I wrote both of my books with mentors of mine. And, you know, I taught an avalanche course with my main ski mentor last year. And, you know, at the end of that week, I'm learning as much as the students we just taught, because my mentor has been doing this for 40 years and is a rock star. You know, so he really helps me improve my game rather than just me going out guiding all year, which, you know, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it, things like that. But if I have my buddy there looking at me saying, you know, maybe think about this, or, you know, whatever, really speeds up my learning and really refines my process. So, you know, a couple times a year, if you can get a posse together, maybe it's affordable, and, you know, grab a guide and go skiing. See, you know, see if you dig it. So.
All right, well, thanks a lot for the details on this. Let's go on, since we have a bit more. So one more question about what is a good age to start backcountry? Or maybe namely, is there a minimum age for a kid who is an excellent skier itching to get out there? So you have kids who ski. Tell us how to go and ski with your kids and what the age would be.
Well, you know, depending on how, you know, if you're in Jackson and your kid's been skiing since the age of 2, you know, which happens. One of the things for those really little kids is just finding gear that'll fit them. So my sons, we have identical twin boys, and one of them is super into Alpine skiing, the other dude's in the Nordic. He is just at the size now. He's 10 years old, and what does he weigh? So he's about 80 pounds, and he's probably oh, he's probably 4'9", 4'8". But the main thing is that foot size, and he's about ready to get into like a 37 or 38 European. And so that is a Mondo. What is that? Like ski boots are in Mondo sizes. Sorry for all the jargon. But you got to find a ski boot that's going to fit. That's the main problem right now. So he's just at about so that'd be like in a women's size 5 or 6 in North America, I think. So like a Mondo 22 or 23. And I think Scarpa and Sportiva make boots that size. So I think as soon as their foot can fit in a touring boot, then you can get them into touring bindings and skis, and the sky's the limit. So, but in terms of taking them out skiing, let's say in a perfect world, you've got gear for the kid. I would just say, for me as a parent, keep it fun. Although, you're a parent, you probably know all this as well as I do. But the main thing is you just can't risk any sort of avalanche terrain, skiing in the little gullies and things like that. There's a young boy here, 12 or 13 years old, buried last year in a really small slide. And thank God he was buried amongst sort of willows and bushes in the side of a ravine. And his dad got down to the lift, didn't see him, went back up, skied the exact same run, and then dug the kid out, and he totally survived. But even a tiny, tiny, tiny slide for an 8 or 10-year-old kid can bury him like that. And so for me personally, there's definitely no rule about it. I think the challenges are gear and keeping it fun. And then for me, these first, years, I'm going to have my kid wearing a beacon just in case something weird happens. But we're going to ski in really mellow terrain and avoid these little weird gullies and what we call terrain traps and things like that. Just so, God forbid, I got buried or something. But with a little teeny kid, if they got pushed downhill and their head's going downhill, it would take almost no snow to bury them. So we got to keep really close to them and whatever. But I would say as soon as they can ski and they're having fun, yeah, take them out to some like low angle meadows. And man, it's not gonna be long until my kid's like leaving me for dead. So anyway,
cool. So the general message is just make sure that you're safe and you know what you're doing and all the precautions are met and no limits there. Great.
Yeah.
And you did touch upon avalanches. So can we have a person asking about your personal experience with avalanches? Did you rescue anyone or like, can you just tell us a bit more about that?
No, I have never rescued anyone. I have not been dug out of an avalanche. I've never had to dig anybody out, thank gosh. I've had one or two small avalanches where I triggered something off to the side and they were very, very shallow. Many times as a ski guide, you're intentionally stomping on a little roll to make, that surface snow slough off of a little steep section or something like that. So I don't really consider those avalanches, but I would say I've had 3 little accidental avalanches. None of them really big enough to bury me or anything like that. And so, if you want to backcountry ski for a long time and have a long career without injuries and tragedy and stuff like this, on those days where the avalanche danger is up, I just dial it way back. I mean, that's as simple as I can put it. In terms of when I say that, I ski on lower angle terrain. I don't get below big slopes that could avalanche on their own and hit me. And I just take it easy on those days. And on the days where the snow is more stable, you haven't been reading about avalanches in the bulletin and things like that, those are the days where you might be able to push it a little bit more and get into some terrain that's more interesting or more challenging for you or whatever you're looking for. But I haven't had any big showstopper avalanche stories, thank gosh. So that's my boring answer, and I hope in 10 years I've got the same one. So
nice. Well, I really like your point of being wary of like people who have a lot of epic stories, which means they're probably taking like a lot of risks. So I'm glad to hear from a professional like you that you have not had the bigger accidents happen, and you hoped for it to stay that way. So that's, I think, a great message for the audience. One more question is, if you have a few quick tips on how to approach woodland terrain. So basically like terrain with woods. I mean, and we all see like, videos on YouTube with guys going between like the woods and everything. Any tips on that?
Yeah, so skiing in the trees can be safer often. But keep in mind, for trees to really anchor a slope, meaning there are enough trees that the slope can't slide. The trees have to be starting to be thick enough that the skiing's almost no good. So there's a book called the Avalanche Handbook that's really, really in depth. I mean, it's like a 300-page sleeping pill if you ever can't sleep at night. But in there, they discuss trees and anchoring on a slope. And the photograph they have in there is from a section of Berthoud Pass in Colorado where people often go to ski in the trees because it's safe, quote unquote. And this photo in the book has a photo of an avalanche running all the way through all these trees. So the irony, you know, it's just that people are trying to hide out in these trees and it's not nearly as safe as they think. So for trees on their own, just to be anchoring the slope, they've got to be almost so tight that it's no longer fun skiing. Now, on those days where it is safer to be in the trees, often it's because the wind is blowing up high. And so all that snow up high is getting pushed around and built into what we call wind slabs, or these big pillows that if you ski through at the wrong place, it could start an avalanche. When the wind is like that, and in Colorado, where I'm from, we have a ton of wind, and you know, luckily interior British Columbia, places like this don't have quite the wind problems often that we usually have in Colorado. But oftentimes in Colorado, when we say, oh, we're just going to stay down in the trees, it's because we're getting out of the wind up high in the Alpine. So that can be a strategy. Just make sure that in fact, the skiing is safer and better, and the snow is less prone to avalanching down there when you duck into the trees. So in general, though, skiing in the trees, I would say there is some avalanche hazard you have to be cognizant of. The big worry for me ski guiding in trees is getting people separated. And on a deep snowpack, like in Steamboat, Colorado, or in places in the Wasatch in Salt Lake, or way up in British Columbia, tree wells are a realistic hazard. I mean, Steamboat Springs in Colorado, it seems like have a tree well or two every year kill somebody. And so that's when I worry about people either going in a tree well or hitting a tree and becoming injured or something. So when I'm ski guiding, let's say I have 5 people with me, I'll ask people to partner up. And while they're skiing in the trees, that way you can keep an eye on your partner. And so one person might be in the front for a little bit and then they switch. And that way you keep an eye on somebody. If they went in a tree well, or God forbid they bonked a tree, excuse me, you're going to know that sooner than later, and you can respond, you know. So skiing in the trees can be great to get out of the wind up high. There's often really sheltered soft snow down on the trees when it's crusty up high. You just want to really make sure you're partnered up. You don't lose track of each other. Be careful about tree wells if you're blessed with skiing in a place with deep snow. And take it a little bit easy. You know, just because it's trees doesn't mean there's no avalanche hazard too. So I hope that's a bit of an answer for you.
Thanks, Rob. And I have to say, I'm already getting some backlash for not asking this question earlier. So what are your thoughts on using an airbag while ski touring?
All right, the airbag
thing. All right.
Okay.
So pros and cons and all the details and your thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, so the cons are obvious. They're expensive. They're a little bit heavy. And having worn, I own one, I ski one quite a bit. They just don't ride quite right. They're a little weird. You've got like this big, the balloon part of it is generally packed up right behind your neck in most of them. Those are the cons, right? They're a little bit limited on space. They're heavy, they're expensive. The pros, depending upon whose data set you look at, right? I try to discount the data from the manufacturers because they're trying to sell backpacks. The backpacks are very effective as long as you pull the trigger in an avalanche. That's first. It looks like about a quarter of people involved in avalanches wearing an airbag never pull the trigger, okay? So that could be because they wait too long. That could be because the trigger's assembled incorrectly. That could be because the cartridge, you know, the cylinder has leaked a little bit, whatever. So what we're coaching people to do is to, like, if you're skiing in avalanche terrain, with you know, an airbag on, have the handle out, practice where it is. Some of them you can practice, like the battery driven ones, the Black Diamond, the Peeps, the Scott. They have these electronic ones that you can deploy and then pack back up. So you can practice. The Mammut has like a little trigger thing you can practice with without the cylinder in there, so it doesn't deploy, you know, and you need to go get it refilled. So practice with it. And if you're start to get avalanched, you see an avalanche happening, the first thing you do is pull the trigger, because there are people who have been avalanched who say, oh yeah, I was going to wait and see how big the avalanche was. But as soon as you get tumbled, it's lights out. You're just on the spin cycle and you can't get to the handle. Okay. But it looks like, I hate to even put a number to it, depending on, I saw one relatively reliable set of numbers from an academic, and it looked like they boosted your chances from about, what was it, high 70% to high 80% of surviving an avalanche, right? Now, most people that get avalanched don't die, right? They get tumbled or they get knocked off their feet, or maybe they don't get buried at all or whatever. But the main thing is that airbags greatly reduce the chances of being completely buried. They also make it, if you are buried, often the top of that balloon, the top of the bladder is sticking out, and all of them are brightly colored. So people don't need to search. They don't do anything. They just see an airbag sticking up out of the snow. They go right down to you, start digging. Where airbags tend not to work is if you're above cliffs, if you're skiing in the trees, if you are crevasses around, or you're above what we, a gully or a crevasse, or anywhere a slope comes down and then flattens immediately. Anywhere the snow could pile up all at once. So a gully or crevasse, a flat bench, something like that. The airbags tend not to work. So, I would say if you got the cash, buy a relatively lightweight one. I have the Mammut one. It's 30 liters, and you can put a little carbon cylinder into it. So it saves me a pound and a bit of the space inside there. And it's about 4 pounds, 10 ounces, I think. And so let's call it 2 pounds heavier than my normal pack. Over the course of a week, lugging that thing around Canada, yeah, I would rather not have that weight. But if I make a stupid decision and I get avalanched, I would rather have the chance that thing might keep me on top and greatly improve my chances of survival. I would say they're worth it for almost everybody. They cost, between $600 and $1,200, and just don't buy a new pair of skis that year, and just get an airbag pack. That's what I would say.
Sorry, I was muted for a sec. Thanks, Rob, for the questions. We are a bit, actually quite longer, but we still have like 250 people joining. So let's answer a few more if you're
totally fine.
With that. And then we do have a lot of specific questions on gear. And I do think that we might leave that one for you for later, or we'll see if we can get some now. But there was a question about, there's quite a few questions about AVI courses in general, but then there is one specific about AVI courses in Europe. Yeah. So maybe can you tell us a bit more? I know there is a big culture of that in the States, and in Europe not so much, but it's picking up. So can you just tell us a few words on that?
Yeah. Do you know where the person's from, Peritza?
Sorry, I don't really. There was a few. I mean, for instance, there was a question about Innsbruck. There was Norway mentioned, and a few more. So
yeah. Okay. So so it's a strange thing in Canada and the United States, and I would say probably New Zealand as well. There's just a little bit more, for whatever reason, of sort of an established approach to avalanche education. In Europe, it's a little bit country by country. So often the mountain clubs in Italy, Austria, Germany, and places like this, the mountain clubs will often offer introductory avalanche courses in addition to like climbing and alpine climbing and crevasse rescue and things like that. So mountain clubs would be one place. I'm sure Germany, I know, has an enormous mountain club, millions of members, that's really active. So they do a ton of different courses. Austria has a really good one as well. And I'm sure Innsbruck is just chock full of resources like that. If you want to email me, I can definitely try to ask some friends and guide colleagues within Europe about specific courses. But the mountain clubs would be the first place to start. And then you could call the guide office in Innsbruck and ask them if they have specific things for the winter. Over here in Chamonix, it seems like most of the the avalanche education is done by, or a lot of it is done by English-speaking guides. So there's some Americans doing it. There are some Brits here who are teaching, funnily enough, they're teaching the American level 1 over here in Chamonix. And so I'm totally happy to help you over by Innsbruck. It would take me a little bit of looking, but I would say in most countries in Europe, it's the mountain clubs first, and then they just have some awareness things that some guides do. In Switzerland, I think the SLF, which is their national avalanche association, the SLF, teaches some courses as well. So it's a little bit of a mishmash in Europe, but you know, try to email me and I'll help you out around Innsbruck.
All right, great. I got reminded, I guess this airbags is a tricky topic, but I also forgot to ask about what are your thoughts on using the Avalanche from Black Diamond?
Yeah, it's kind of fallen out of favor as airbags have become more prevalent. But I will say one of my best ski partners and one of the smartest guys I know in the snow skis on certain days with an airbag and an Avalanche. So the Avalanche, for people who don't know, the Avalanche is it's this tube that they make backpacks where it's integrated in the backpack, or it used to come as just this thing you wore around your chest that just looked like a tube, and right up by your mouth, it had what looks like almost like a scuba mouthpiece that you put in your mouth. And what it did was, if you were fully buried in the snow, you hopefully have that thing in your mouth. And when you exhale, your exhalation goes down through the tube and out at your back. Now, the reason this is important is because when people die of asphyxia buried in the snow, what happens is you're sitting there in the snow when you first get buried and you begin breathing. And the warmth and moisture in your breath eventually melts the snow around your face, and then that freezes, and that ice is over, and you can no longer pull oxygen from the snowpack. So you get what's called an ice mask or a lens around your face, and that's how you end up running out of oxygen. The Avalanche takes your warm, moist breath and you exhale, and it goes out back by your back. So that ice lens is produced back behind you, and you end up breathing through your nose, inhaling air out of the snowpack around you. That's how it works. They've buried people for an hour with them, and you're totally fine. You could sit down there for quite a while. I had one for a long time, and to be honest, I've just thrown my hat in the ring with the airbags. So I don't ski with one anymore. I certainly wouldn't discourage it if you think it's a good idea. In certain times, like let's say you're spring skiing and you're just skiing on totally refrozen snow and it's relatively low angle, you're not getting after it or something, I don't bring an airbag, I don't bring an Avalanche, any of that stuff. So it's a good tool. I certainly wouldn't discount it. I wouldn't say it's a bad idea, but it's just another thing for me to bring along between an airbag and a helmet and a rope and all this stuff I have guiding. I just don't do the Avalanche thing anymore, but I would say it's still a pretty cool tool.
Cool. And then can you say a few words on the type of insurance you need for mountain rescue and all that in Europe? And maybe Europe and the States as well. You probably know both sides. So can you just tell us a bit on that?
Yeah, so in Europe, often when you go buy a ski pass, let's say you're going to Verbier for the week, or you're coming to Chamonix for the week, or you go over to Cortina or something like that, when you buy your ski pass for the week, you can often on a little bit extra, another 15 euros or something, and you will get rescue insurance with it. That said, if you have a problem in Europe, you just dial 112 and mountain rescue is going to come. So if you have a real problem, I would say just dial the phone and deal with that later. But you can, especially around the big towns like Cortina, Innsbruck, Zermatt, these places, when you buy your ski pass, ask about rescue insurance for the week, and that'll help you. In the United States, every few years they say, oh, we're going to start charging for rescues or something, and they never do. That said, in Colorado, as an example, where I'm from, if you buy I guess it's a fishing license for $10 a year or something, you automatically get rescue insurance. So, and I think it was good for 5 years or something like this. So I would look into buying a hunting or a fishing license in the United States, and that'll probably get you rescue insurance in at least that state. when you travel to exotic locations, so now all of a sudden we're going to Svalbard, or we're going to Georgia to go ski mountaineering, or Antarctica, or something crazy, there are companies that will sell you global rescue insurance, and that's probably worth getting, including evac insurance to get you back to your home country. So that's worth considering. Global rescue is probably the biggest, most popular right now. And so that it's worth looking into if you're doing somewhere, you're skiing somewhere weird, so.
All right, and then we had a few more questions on, if you have a few more minutes, Rob, on
Yeah.
and if you have any information on skiing in the northeast of America.
I do. I just saw a good comment down there that Rick said, the American Alpine Club membership includes limited rescue insurance. So read the fine print. I think it only goes up to 6,000 meters. Doesn't go further north than 80 degrees latitude north, something like that. But the mountain clubs, I know Austria actually has really good ones. Thanks for reminding me, Rick. Austria, the Austrian Mountain Club, anybody can join it to get their rescue insurance, and it's really good, and it's worldwide. The American Alpine Club, places like this. So do a little shopping on that. And I'm sorry, I saw Rick's comment, and so I wanted to back up. And remind me, Peritza, what was your next question?
So about some info about backcountry skiing in the Northeast.
Oh yeah, cool.
In the States, yeah.
Yes, there is backcountry skiing in the Northeast. And it can be really good. I haven't done it yet, but these famous places like Tuckerman's Ravine, Mount Washington, places like this have some pretty good skiing. It can be really brutal in the winter with the wind they get, but there's decent skiing up there. And since a couple of these big hurricanes that have hit Sandy and these other things, there's been new backcountry runs cut in the forest. And so there's like, I think Powder Magazine or Backcountry Magazine did a story on that a couple years ago. There is touring to be done up there, though. It's obviously not as extensive as the West, but it can be done. There are some really good guides working up there. Mark Chauvin in North Conway, New Hampshire is really skilled. He skis a ton. He does good avalanche courses as well. Mark Sinnott is up there, Silas Rossi, Peter Doucette. There's a bunch of good guides up there. And all those folks I mentioned are internationally licensed. So they're certified in rock ski and alpine. And there's some very, very good steep skiing up there, in addition to just plain old fun ski touring on mellow terrain. So do a little bit of Googling. If you look at chauvinguides.com, his last name is spelled Chauvin, chauvinguides.com. You can see Mark's website. He talks about ski touring and avalanche courses and stuff like that. So give Mark a shout. That's who he was my mentor going through the guide program, one of them. And I wrote the mountain guide manual with Mark. So he's a phenomenal resource. He's awesome.
All right, Rob, let's take a few more minutes, and I guess we'll break the record in both attendees and the time with almost 2 hours in, but it is what it is. So can you address, I know you mentioned it briefly, but can you address the AVI runout zones and the dangers of getting caught in an avalanche while in the runout zone?
Yeah,
that's not
so
maybe...
that's a great question. Because so a runout zone is where the debris from an avalanche might, puke out into a meadow or, a lower angle area, right? So that's what we call the runout zone. So now when you read the Avalanche Bulletin, the forecasters are going to give you a heads up if avalanches are running all the way full track, or the full length of their path into their big runout zones. They're going to be saying, hey, heads up. These are big avalanches that are running all the way through the runout zone, right? So those big obvious avalanche paths are going to be warning you about. So those can often be really easy to avoid because they're huge treeless swaths of forest knocked down, and they're really obvious to see. Those are pretty easy. You can say, well, okay, it's going to take us an extra half hour. We're just going to skin all the way around the bottom of this thing, staying in dense forest, and ski around the other side. But I often see people trying to estimate how far an avalanche is going to run using what's called an alpha angle or all these kinds of things. And I mean, that's really tricky, to try to imagine how far an avalanche might run. So, in an obvious avalanche path, you don't want to be hanging around. You don't want to stop. You don't want to sit around in the have lunch in the run out zone, right? Those are pretty obvious things. Once the avalanche danger is getting up, so let's say it's moderate, considerable, things like that, you need to start thinking about anytime you're crossing an avalanche path, you just have to ask, is this a good idea or a bad idea, right? If you're tired at the end of the day, I've been there too, or you're out of water, you've been out of water for an hour and a half, you just want to get back to the car or the hut, and you're just being lazy crossing an avalanche path, eventually that's going to bite you, so you really want to be disciplined about avoiding avalanche runouts when you can. If you're going to be in an avalanche path skiing or crossing it or whatever, you really want to have a very solid idea about, this is a safe idea. I know why I'm doing this, and this is a risk that I'm comfortable with. I ski in avalanche terrain quite a bit, and we cross avalanche paths all the time. But on certain days, high danger, or when you're getting large avalanches running long distances, I might just say, like, we are not going into avalanche terrain. We're not crossing runouts. We're not doing anything today. So, there are no trees there for a reason, right? So you just want to avoid that stuff as much as possible. The things that are much more subtle are when you don't have obvious clues. So there's no vegetation clues, or you're up in the Alpine where it's not totally clear if you're in an avalanche path or not. Then you've really got to be on it, looking at maps, using that slope clinometer, and really using your eyeballs to say, like, this is the slope that could slide, and it looks like it could come down this distance. And that really goes back to that terrain recognition. So in general, just avoid avalanche runouts. Obviously, it's not totally doable all the time. So if you're going to be in a runout zone, just have a really good reason to be there. So.
All right, thanks. One more, and this maybe ties to your Svalbard trip. I think you mentioned something with corn one time. So basically, tips on Alaska backcountry, or any special tips for sub-zero temperature and going backcountry skiing?
Okay. Yeah, good question. Yeah, Alaska backcountry skiing, go to Valdez, go to the Chugach, have fun. It's awesome. I did one of my courses and exams up in Valdez. It was phenomenal at the time of my life. It was awesome. Yeah, so specifically about colder temps, that video I showed of my friend Cooper skiing, that was like the coldest week I've spent in my life. It was 40 below every morning we left the hut. It was unbelievable. I wore the same battery heated socks for 6 days straight. And so first things first, cold injury is a real thing, because as soon as you're skiing downhill, now it's 25 below, whatever it is, sub-zero, and now you have wind on your face. So on a day like that, I might leave the hut with 2 buffs, these stretchy things you can pull up over your face, a balaclava if you got it. The other thing that can really help with protecting your face from cold injury is like that goopy dermatone stuff, and you rub it on your nose, maybe the tips of your ears, under your eyes. And that stuff keeps the wind and the moisture off. That can be really nice. And then if you have cold hands and feet, battery powered socks, I got to say, are pretty great. Get the ones where the sock is heated, not the insole of your boot, because the insole of your boot, you're going to take your liners in and out of your boot to dry them occasionally, and the wire ends up breaking. So I would be careful about that. But the battery powered socks were phenomenal. I love them. And I run pretty hot. And so that was a cold week. Mittens do better than gloves in general. You can throw a hand warmer in there. That's a nice deal. The big thing when it's that cold is going to be keeping your skins dry and warm. So what I do when it's cold like that is you take your skin off your ski. I fold it over in half. So glue side to glue side. So now you have your skin is half length. And then I open my jacket and I wrap it around my chest. And I put the other one right below it, and then I zip it back up. So on the down, you're sort of reheating and drying out your skin. Because if your skins get that cold and a little bit wet, they're not going to stick to the bottom of your ski, and you're just going to battle with them all day. So bring a big old puffy jacket, keep your skins warm, and then, adapt as needed for like your face, your hand, fingers, and toes for the most part. But
all right. Well, Rob, we had a lot more questions. We actually have 60 questions that are yet unanswered. So, cool. So let's call it a day at the 2 hours, right? So sorry, everyone who is still waiting for the answer, but please note, we have all your questions. We will pass it along to Rob. And I guess, Rob, in the next, few days or a week, you'll reach out to people as the time allows.
Yeah.
So maybe the lockdown comes in handy for that. Just a joke. I mean, just a joke. We all like we all have to go out to be sane, so to speak, or to have fun. But look, I just have to say thank you all again for coming. Thank you for staying for 2 hours. I know we go a bit overboard with time, but I'm glad to see you all still here, still enjoying, and still asking questions, still chatting. So stay tuned for more. We have a lot more interesting topics coming up. I'm pretty sure we'll repeat this one with Rob, probably I'll say in January, when the season is a bit more kicked off. And
cool.
Rob, do you have anything else to say to our like 180 participants that stayed for the full 2 hours with us?
Yeah, so this is how it goes. I start talking and who knows, Peritza and I get on the phone and it's like an hour goes by. Thanks a ton. Hit me with emails. I'll try to get to a bunch of questions this week. And I'm easy to find on Instagram, on Facebook, or through Peritza. Use my email address. And just, I would say, make sure you're having fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth doing. So just keep it safe, stay out of Avalanche Terrain for your first year, and make sure you're having fun. And hope to meet all of you at some point.
All right, and Rob will email the winner of the book tomorrow, and you'll all get the recording. Again, thank you so much for coming. It's such a pleasure to do these webinars, and hopefully we have a lot more for you coming up soon. Stay tuned. Bye, Rob. Thanks a lot.
See ya. Thanks, you guys.